It's a gorgeous film. Obviously, Alan Rickman directed it. He's also in it. Clearly, he plays King Louis XIV, the sun god himself. Please join me in welcoming Alan Rickman.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hi.
So, thank you for joining us tonight. Stupendous, beautiful. I know who shot this film, and it really looks amazing.
Ellen Kuras, yeah. Great. Very rare. Well, not rare that she's American, rare that it's a woman cinematographer, one of the few and one of the greatest.
Right. We were talking earlier about how hard it is to sort of reduce this film to a simple, throwaway line. Oh, it's about this, it's about that. It's a love story, it's a feminist story. It's about landscape gardening, which is hysterical in a way. Well, that's a very serious film. Why were you drawn to the subject matter?
Well, I mean, when you list it like that, you think you'd have to be an idiot. You're actually going to try and make a movie about this. Okay, so at its heart, it is a love story. But it is told the script is by Alison Deegan. It's told very much from a woman's point of view, and it is about what it is to be, or to try to be, a strong, independent woman in a man's world. And what she's done is to create a character for Kate who couldn't possibly have existed. So what interested me was the notion of it actually being a very modern story inside all this period trapping, which is frankly a huge annoyance when you're thinking about the budget and the weather and the fact that aeroplanes don't come over in 17th century France, and there isn't a motorway just around the corner that you've got to deal with. But I like the fact that film can take a modern story and kind of shaft it into a period context, and hopefully after a while you stop thinking about the background and you start thinking modern thoughts about the world that she's trying to operate in, and what might be the parallels still with the world now.
But it has that lovely mix of some characters who did exist. The character you play, the King of France.
And Matthias's, except he would have been 70.
Right, he was very young and he was very youthful for someone in such an important position. But that blending of the two, so Kate Winslet plays a character, as Alan said, couldn't possibly have existed because she was a working woman in a man's world. Where do you think that came from in the head of the writer? I mean, to come up with a landscape gardener as well in the court of Versailles.
I know. Well, Alison's a very passionate gardener.
Are you?
No.
Not a gardener at all?
No, I'm a passionate goer to gardens.
Right.
And sitter in gardens. In other people's gardens. That they've planted, Oh, this is very beautiful, thank you. No, Alison's a very passionate gardener, passionate about gardening, and she's also passionate about that period of history. She's an actress. Her husband, Sebastian Barry, is a very celebrated novelist and playwright in Ireland, and she'd had her kids and she thought, I'm going to do something. And so she sat down and wrote a script. And because she knew I knew her husband, she put it in the post.
Really?
It's as simple as that, really, in one sense. And then you pick this script up, which is 180 pages originally. And as I've told this story before, but it's true, she is dyslexic, and so it's 180 pages of the only punctuation, and it was commas every 3 words. So it was tough to read, but at the same time, a real test of the fact that you kept turning the pages and thought, this writing is really fresh and original, and not just because of a kind of Irish lift to the narrative or to the dialogue that is there, just because of her take on the story. It's I hadn't really read anything quite like it.
The dialogue is quite beautiful. you play the King of France. Let's look at a scene where you're getting dressed up, because I think this is a scene where we're going to hear the language.
Okay.
Can we run that clip? No? Wonderful. I love the way you directed this scene. I love the close-up on the clothes going on, the man becoming the king. It reminds me of the scene in Life of Galileo, the Brecht scene.
All right, yeah.
Tell me what went into your ideas of shooting that scene.
Alison wrote a scene where Louis was making that speech to a ballroom of 300 courtiers. Those of us in charge of the budget said, we can't afford that. So I said, why don't you go away and rewrite it as Louis practicing it in front of his children? Because then we only have
children.
5 of them on the floor. And actually it's an example of how limitations sometimes free your imagination, and it actually turns out to be a much better way of doing it, because of course that's something else that could never have happened. Louis' dressing and levées took 2 hours with hundreds of people waiting outside to be then received. But the slow putting on of every item of clothing and the wigs and the shoes and everything, and it was a huge event.
Does it help your performance as all those clothes go on to become the king, or not so much?
Costumes help your performance, whatever it is, because it's part of the character you're playing, whether it's an old sheet or or that kind of stuff. And there are rules to how you walk and how you talk as soon as you put that on. These are people who had dancing lessons and walking lessons from the time they were 5. So the clothes are there. They're there to design, especially in Louis' case, to show off every part of your body to its best advantage. Those wigs were only invented by Louis because he started to go bald and he didn't like that. So he went to the opposite of bald, which is like the hugest thing you could put on your head. Thank God we didn't go for period accuracy, because it would have weighed 5 kilos.
Really?
And God knows what would have been living inside it as well.
Yeah. Well, thank God men these days aren't so vain. When you wear all that stuff, do you think, oh, I'm so happy I was born in the 20th century?
Well, when you're trying to go to the bathroom, yeah. Definitely.
Let's talk about Kate Winslet. You've worked with her before on Sense and Sensibility. Stupid question, because obviously she's one of the best young actresses around, but why did you want her to play Sabine de Barra?
Well, it's not a stupid question, but it's an obvious answer. She is an amazing actress. Why is she an amazing actress? Because she works so hard, because the work ethic is so great, because she hangs on to a sense of humor, because she is a Democrat on the set, and utterly caring and sharing and listening to her fellow actors. And she's never lost certain things that I met when we worked together the first time when she was 19. And also, the miracle of her work is she opens her mouth and you believe it. And if you're creating a character that couldn't have existed, a huge part of her job is to make us believe that she did.
And she does. She's wonderful. Louis XIV was, he had this idea to build Versailles, the biggest chateau ever built, the gardens, the restaurant. You have a wonderful shot at the end of the movie that pans up and we see the whole expanse of Versailles and the gardens. He's a little cracked, it seems, to take on this venture, and I thought, well, is filmmaking a bit like, can you compare filmmaking to what he was doing, sort of running all these different departments and making sure everything comes together for a window to perfection?
Yeah, I don't think he had 3 producers breathing in his ear about, we have 3 days here, you cannot go over.
He probably didn't understand over budget.
He wouldn't have understood that at all. No, what he did was took Lenotre by the shoulders and pointed at a mosquito-ridden swamp and said, build me Versailles here. And 18,000 people got on with it. at some
18,000.
cost. Yeah, and then when we went to Versailles on a kind of field trip, the Louis expert took us, we were in the Hall of Mirrors, and he pointed up and said, number one, there were 10,000 candles that had to be lit every night here. And number two, this mural that we're looking at on the ceiling, probably within a week of it being finished, it was black from all the smoke from the candles. So there's the madness and the vaulting ambition. And even the fountains, the irrigation was such a problem that as he took all these people on the tour of all his beautiful fountained gardens, there's some poor sod running around and turning one fountain off and the next one on because they couldn't have them all going at once.
It's astounding, really.
But go there if you haven't been, because it's breathtaking.
Right. I think the best scene in the movie is when you're in a garden, having a rest, enjoying the garden, as you said. Your wig is off, and Kate.
Well, I'm very upset because my wife has died, so it's not just having a rest. But, you know, Louis XIV is not allowed to express human emotions, and there's nowhere for him to just be quiet. So, you're right. He takes himself to this little garden and sits there, but removes the trappings. And then Kate comes in and she thinks he's a gardener.
So Kate Winslet's character thinks he's a fellow gardener, so she's not scared to talk. You have this wonderful back and forth conversation that becomes very profound.
Yeah.
But I have to say, you're the master of minimalist facial acting with one eyebrow, perhaps. So I think we have to show them the clip. Can we show them the clip in the garden? Well, it wasn't exactly the clip I was talking about. You'll have to go see the film to see the lead up to that moment, which was priceless. Lovely bit of comic dialogue in there. The film is also a love story, as we mentioned. It's not just about gardening, as I so trivially refer to it.
No, just to allay people's worry, the film is not a history lesson. And
it's not about gardening.
It's not a gardening book. It has a carriage crash.
There's action, there's love, there's some hanky-panky in a horse and carriage.
But it is Once Upon a Time, definitely.
Yes.
It is that.
So tell me about casting Matthias Schoenaerts against Kate.
Well, it was a wonderful serendipity, really, in as much as when I cast Kate, she was when we were ready and funded, and she was the right age to play the part. And I'd been working on it from a time when she probably would have been too young to play it. I was filming in Belgium. I had seen Rust and Bone. Matthias's name was mentioned. And I thought, well, he's a wonderful actor, but he's Belgian. And we all have to be speaking the same language with the same accent. So I looked him up on YouTube, and he was giving an interview about Rust and Bone in LA with perfect English, but with an American accent. So we just had to iron out the American bit.
Well, have you seen Far From the Madding Crowd? I mean, he's in that with an English accent.
Well, he did that after us.
After you?
We helped.
You helped. You said he's clearly very good. And if you haven't seen Rust and Bone and Bullhead, which is phenomenal, you have to go see those.
He's also a wonderful person, and what the surprise is there's a beautiful sense of humor there and a great smile. So you don't that was my worry from having seen Rust and Bone, and then I was in Belgium filming, and the point was that he was in Antwerp, so I could meet him like a half an hour's drive, and this big smiling person came in the door. So.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you've been working on this for a long time, since Kate was too young for the part. I know it takes a long time to get films made, and I know you're very busy with your theatre work and other movies, but why? This is only the second film that you've directed.
Well, because of Harry Potter, because...
you said it. You said you wouldn't mention it.
Oh, well, I have to. It's the truth. When I started that in, 2000, there were only 3 books, and I didn't know that I would have anything to do with the 4th or the 5th. And I finished the first film in '97. So there was 3 years, and then suddenly there was 10 years when I couldn't direct a movie, because you have to have a year and a half completely free. And although I was making other movies, being on stage, directing in the theatre, I couldn't direct a film until I had finished with Harry Potter.
Let's open this up to the audience now. I'm sure there are lots of questions.
Hi, Mr. Rickman. How are you? My name is Scott. I'm a huge fan of your work. My question is, I mean, you've played such iconic villains over the years. I want to know, we didn't really get a look at it from the trailer. Well, the two of the top 5 most iconic ever, probably. And I was wondering, does this film have an antagonist? It looks like a romance story, but obviously sometimes in those romantic stories, it's the one that gets in the way that really is the villain at the heart of a story. Is there a villain at the heart of the story? And thank you very much.
Well, as an actor, words like that are anathema, because you can't put a label on yourself, otherwise you can't play it. So anything cool, as far as I'm concerned, if I'm playing something that you call a villain, I'm playing a perfectly nice person who just wants stuff. You know, he's got his own agenda. It's different. Other people call him that. As far as he's concerned, he's right. So I think in this film, because it's layered, I hope, and complex, and in a way the antagonist is life, and people are trying to come to some kind of negotiation with their place in the scheme of things. Yeah, Helen McCrory, who plays Matthias's wife, is the person who tries to put a spoke in the wheel of the whole operation, yes. But I hope we also show her vulnerable side. You know, there are reasons why she does that. She's, at that time, yeah, there would never have been a woman in a professional job. There were women who were cooking, cleaning, sewing. At the other end of the spectrum, there were women standing around looking pretty until they stopped looking so pretty, and then they got dumped. So Helen McCrory is playing the woman who's very aware that she's clinging to the wreckage. And so that's what I mean about the film having, I hope, modern connotations. It's not a million miles away from what goes on in the film industry for female actors. Do you want to call her a villain in the film? You might, but I wouldn't. I'd say she is who she is, and her agenda's her agenda, and she does what she does to survive.
That's a very good answer. So this woman is she's in the inner circle of the king, but she's about to be ousted. Just like
well, she's in danger of it because she knows there's another woman who's taking his affections. Her place in court is assured because she's married to Andre Lenotre, but she knows that Kate Winslet has arrived on the scene. They've been in a loveless marriage, but it's suited them both to maintain their positions and certainly maintain hers. If he leaves her, she's going to be this. How's she going to survive? So she gets busy.
She's pretty villainous. Right down here.
How did you decide to both act and direct in this film? And could you address the challenges and benefits of doing this? And how did you go about preparing to play such an iconic historical figure as an actor?
Well, I didn't decide to do it. There was huge pressure from the budget. I leave you to work that one out. You know, if the director plays a part, they're not so pushed to actually pay you because they know you're going to be there anyway. So it just helps in putting together a financial package. I wasn't that keen, but he's not in that many scenes. And the good news about Louis XIV is that he doesn't move anywhere. He's a fixed point, and everybody comes to him. So it physically made it a little easier. Having said that, you know, it was a great pleasure to work with Kate again, and going about it, you rely on a lot of other people. like Kate, when it comes down to a scene like the one we have in the film, acting is really just about listening, and I'm working with somebody who really listens to me, and so in order to feed her, so I should give her the same gift, and then suddenly acting becomes a lot less difficult than people think it is, if you focus on the other person and not on yourself.
This is coming from a 16-year-old's perspective. So I wanted to know what the purpose of this movie was. Why did you do it? And what would set it apart from like every other English 16th century movie? What would set it apart? Because it seems really, really interesting.
Go with that. I think you'll find that it is really, really interesting. I hope what you'll find is that, as I was saying earlier, when you start watching it, and I know this from screenings of the film, it's often a trap when period costumes appear, because people go, oh yeah, right, I got the picture. And out will come the fan, and then they'll all start talking in a funny language, and it won't feel like anything to do with my life. But it's an escape, but it's quite a pleasant one. Although I would have to say that I was in one that wasn't like that, called Sense and Sensibility, which I think is a profoundly truthful piece of writing, because it comes from a truly great writer, Jane Austen, and Emma Thompson wrote a truly a script that honored a great writer. And sometimes you learn more about humanity when the story has some quite rigid rules. You know, you don't have to just, four-letter words don't have to appear every other word for you to feel something truthful about the way people interact. And I hope profoundly, and I believe, that this film has a lot to say about the way men and women come to some kind of, or could come to, a healthier negotiation, if you like, with each other. This film, nearly the last lines of the film are a woman saying, "What about us?" and a man saying, "We will shape each other." That's not a 16th century thing to say, and it's not even heard much now, but it should be. So keep with it, it seems interesting.
Mr. Rickman, thank you so much for coming. The question I've had in mind is, what were some of the most challenging parts about making the film, and how did you overcome them?
Well, as it turns out, you know, you can't always know at the time, but for reasons of the budget, we shot the whole film in England, not in France. So you discover that the benefit is that England has a history of stealing other people's cultures. So not only can you go to the British Museum and see the Elgin marbles, but in some of the buildings that you'll see in the film, there are genuine 17th century French interiors that have been picked up and put down in them, and so we film in them. However, England is also challenged by weather, and also the fact that it's quite a thin country. So, as I was saying, one change of the wind and suddenly you're on a flight path. And so the scene between Kate and I don't think we did a take that went on for much longer than about 45 seconds before a plane came over. And then the poor sound guys are coming out from a bush having twiddled their knobs, but they can't get rid of the motorway that's just around the corner. You have sun, cloud, cloud, sun, wind, still, cloud, sun. So then you get back into the editing room and you think, how are we ever going to cut this together? So fortunately, England's also full of great technical experts. So the grading departments turn a cloudy day into a sunny day, and vice versa, and somehow or other, because you think this is going to be impossible. Timing, we shot the whole film in 40 days. And it's a huge undertaking. When I looked at the call sheet every day, God, how are we going to get through this? Time, budget, weather. Usual thing. And probably somebody with a vast budget will tell you the same.
Right. I'm afraid that was the last question we have time for.
Please go and see it though, because it's not as effortful as it sounds.
No, it's delightful. Mr. Alan Rickman, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And we look forward to your next film.